Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome or welcome back, as the case might be. My name is Dalibor Petrovic. I'm the founder of the Summit Leadership Alliance and your host to these TechTonic Conversations, a series of live webcasts where I'm bringing guests who have interesting, timely, actionable topics to share on topics relative to technology innovation, enterprise tech leadership, but also the professional services industry and its own evolution. And today, I'm absolutely thrilled to welcome my colleague and friend, James O'Dowd. James, lovely to see you. Thank you very much for finding the time to be with us today.
Well, thank you for having me, Dalibor. It's a pleasure to be here. I really appreciated the invite and looking forward to this discussion.
Certainly, me too. So, James is the founder and managing partner of Patrick Morgan. And Patrick Morgan is a talent advisory agency based out of New York and London, England. And they specialize in sourcing top talent for world leading professional services firms, but also private equity firms. And James, of course, you and I met and got connected through LinkedIn. I have been really intrigued by your masterful commentary and posts on what's happening with professional services industry. And I thought, oh my God, this person, this man knows the inside and out. It's so obvious. Why would not we sit together and have a conversation and pick your brain, about what you're seeing around professional services, and then especially within context of professional services, peek into your area of expertise, which is the talent from both sides of the spectrum. So that's the topic of today. And ladies and gentlemen who are following us live, this is a live conversation. Today is May 1st, 2025, this fine Thursday. So please feel free to participate by using the Q&A function of this Zoom platform. And I'll do my best to answer as many questions as might come over the next 45 minutes to an hour. So, James, let's delve straight into the topic. Perhaps the first thing that I would ask you is if you could maybe just tell us a little bit about who you are and how you navigated your life and career to now be the founder and managing partner of Patrick Morgan.
Yeah, thanks, Dalibor. I set up Patrick Morgan quite a young age, at 25, 26. After university, I left. I went to Cornwall Ferry, spent a couple of years there in the professional services practice. Doing executive search for some of the most reputable and established consulting, accounting, legal, IT services businesses in the world. We set this business up, whatever it was, 7, 8 years ago. I guess I didn't have much to lose at the time. Just kind of went for it, didn't expect it to get anywhere, and we've managed to scale this business quite successfully. Initially doing partner-led search for the big fours, the big system integrators, the big strategy houses. And we've evolved and diversified this business into much more, both in terms of the services we're able to provide. I mean, speak a little bit there about the LinkedIn content that really speaks to a lot of the work that we're doing around business intelligence and market research and advisory, specifically for the professional services sector. And our client base as well, right? Like we saw this emerging trend of private equity coming into the sector around 2021, 22. I found that really interesting and really lent into that particular client base as a potential disruptor of the professional services sector, as we've subsequently seen, and set our business up really to serve that community, helping them think through the intricacies of the sector, helping them think through how they acquire businesses, how they develop value in organizations, and as a result, we're now quite a diversified professional services advisor capabilities across strategy management, consulting, tech consulting, accounting, but also able to sit with investors as they think through some of the challenges of buying into the sector and being successful in doing so. So it's just a little bit of an overview of where we've come from and where we are.
It's a fascinating spot to be in, to actually observe what's going on
Yeah,
globally
absolutely.
with professional services industry. I think that you're actually in a unique position to be close enough to understand what's going on, to be able to see across multiple different players because you serve them all, but yet be one step removed and be able to actually see the picture from the outside of the bell, right? You're outside of it as well. So if I was to ask you to help us understand like what's going on with professional services industry, like what is actually happening? How would you describe what's been happening?
I mean, put simply, there's a lot of disruption of the established players, and it all orientates back to, if you had to capture it in one kind of statement, it's disruption of the operating model of a traditional partnership, which so many of these professional services firms historically were. Um, and then we can go on to talk about sort of private equity coming into the sector, the influence of AI, um, the changing needs of individuals within these businesses. But fundamentally, to my mind, so much of the change that you're seeing within these organizations relates to the fact that the operating model and governance structure within traditional partnerships is no longer the most efficient, competitive way of running these organizations. Um, and a lot of the disruption you're seeing, and particularly when you talk to the PEs, because that's their first classic move. Let's come in, let's buy senior partners out, let's change the governance structure so we can enact change and innovation quicker. Comes back to that operating model.
Yeah. So you're see, so you're observing that the traditional operating model, which is based essentially on a pyramidal structure, that the pyramid is effectively eroding, and that's challenging the continuity of the model itself, right?
It's a big part of the pyramid, but I think even before the
Like, is there
pyramid,
more? Yeah, yeah. So
yeah,
let's
yeah,
maybe
I
think
think
what might be some factors what might be some factors that you feel have resulted in this situation?
I think fundamentally the way that partnerships, and you think of most accounting firms and law firms, not all, but most are partnerships consulting firms. They're not at least in the modern day, the most efficient way of running a business, particularly when you consider that it requires a lot of consensus to make decisions and investment amongst a group of people who typically have the least vested interest in doing so, i.e., those with the most tenure, those typically closest to retirement, and perhaps less interested in innovating and developing their firms compared to, say, someone who still had 10 or 15 years yet to run and will enjoy the value of that transformation. So I think like fundamentally these larger firms' ability to innovate, they're tripping over themselves a little bit. They're a little bit slow to move. And then within that, there are a lot of knock-on effects, right? Like the reality is, and we were saying this when we came on the call, the last 5 years, some of the let's go to technology that's become available to smaller business owners, to former partners like yourself, has enabled them to serve clients in a way that was only privy to some of the larger firms before because of their scale and investment. And the knock-on effect of that has been, because they can innovate quicker and implement some of this technology without carrying additional cost and overhead. They're able to serve those clients in a quicker, more meaningful way. I think as well that the other point to go with that when we're talking about disruption and the emergence of boutiques, and particularly this trend of former partners setting up on their own, is like increasingly I think the clients of our clients, which historically were large corporates and now increasingly private equity, are a lot more open-minded and more diligent buyers of services, and that they spend a lot more time, I think, getting past the brand and really understanding what's underneath that and what the delivery teams are looking like. And it's just made it possible, I think, for pieces of work. And it differs, right? Large transformation is still very much the privy of larger firms, but
Yeah.
small M&A projects, stuff like that, a lot more available to to boutique to smaller firms. And so the effect of that is you now have a really competitive kind of mid-market professional services offering that really offer employees and clients something very different to what the big firms are able to provide for. And a lot of the change is coming all because of that cycle, I would say.
Yeah. So what I sense from your commentary, so there are multiple dynamics at play at the moment. There is a technological disruption which is attacking the meat of the pyramid. There is a trend that the clients are becoming more perhaps sophisticated in looking for value and outcome as opposed to accepting, large, complex, long projects, expensive projects. That there is technological enablement that allows senior partners to start their own firms and boutiques in a simple, low investment manner and then directly compete with the larger firms. And that on top of all of these dynamics, there is a business operating model that feels a little bit sort of calcified, right? Really hard to disrupt because it is being preserved by those who have the vested interest in its sustainment, right?
And when you speak to the PE houses, that's the first thing they go to, right? It's I mean, look, they are interested in AI and of course, they're bringing their offshoring, they'll do the roll-up strategies, shared services. But fundamentally, when a lot of them, because you didn't see private equity in this sector pre-COVID, right? They saw it as
Correct.
too high risk, too people dependent. But now they take a very different view, and it's about momentum as well, right? I mean, one goes successful. You see New Mountain Capital flip Citrin Cooperman 15x to Blackstone. Obviously, that turns heads. There's a general flight to quality in private equity at the moment, anyway, particularly with tariffs. People don't want to invest in consumer goods manufacturing. But when you talk to them, they question seriously this operating model of larger firms, which have a lot of senior management, for example, who aren't commercial, so they're not generating revenue within the
Yep.
organizations.
Yep.
A lot of costs going into peripheral areas, a lot of kind of padding around the middle, a lot of back office function. And private equity, are very diligent operators of businesses. And I think when they look at a large consulting firm, accounting firm, and the way that they've operated historically, they see huge opportunity for efficiency gain. And then they redirect a lot of that towards a much more meritocratic, so performance-based pay, which in turn sucks out a lot of the top talent from these larger firms, i.e., the partners who have the genuine client relationships, which when you look under the hood is actually a minority, and they begin to move across. And it's all about momentum, right? Like I think if you'd have asked me 3 or 4 years ago, representing a relatively unknown brand in the marketplace, and say the accounting marketplace, the consulting marketplace, who had just been bought by a PE firm, and I was going to a senior whatever big four partner, would they come across it? It'd been a really hard sell. That there's no way these guys would be able to go to market. They don't have our capability. They don't have our price point. They don't have our reputation. Now it's almost flipped. Like everyone kind of is seeing the value of these models, and the reason for that is a lot of the early movers who have gone to these types of vehicles have been very financially successful, and a lot of that wealth gain has come from, as I say, taking a much bigger portion of what they're generating, but also in the equity upside. So, real equity, right? So not partnership equity. They're realizing gains that if the business is successful, of course, far exceeds what they could make with a larger firm. And I think when you see that happening enough to colleagues, and you're quite frustrated because you're a top performer at your current firm, and you feel like a lot of the revenue you're producing is just paying the salaries of the lower performers because it's a profit share. You start to look at those individuals and think, actually, this might work. And I think we're at a stage now where, a significant number of people who haven't made the move are always interested in having that conversation, depending on the firm and the investor. And so it's just a real shift. It's a real change in the market. And who are the winners? I mean, who are the firms that do this really well? Well, they're kind of pure play specialists in what they do. So businesses like Accordion, fantastic business in the CFO advisory space, Stacks, who are related to PE, DD, and strategy, OC&C here in the UK. You know, real specialists in what they do with really operational type partners who are going in, not just selling the work, but delivering it. And yeah, that's sorry, quite a long way of answering your question, but
No,
that
this
is the
is
shift.
exactly this is exactly the answers that I'm actually curious to hear
Yeah.
you say. So, uh, what I extract from this is that one way. So you almost described two two things that are playing out now as competing against the traditional model, which are specialized boutique agencies that gather one or more partners in a loose confederation, and they are focused on delivering around deep specialty that they have. So that's one way to succeed today. And then the other way that you described is private equity purchasing traditional firms that are traditional partnerships, and then either working to really flip them,
Yeah.
perhaps even structurally flip them. Like, do you see evidence that private equities perhaps are buying partnerships and converting them to corporations in order to allow? Is that like, are you seeing that as a trend? Is that a path forward, or is it? What's your thought on that?
That's the first thing they always do. Yeah, they will come in. So the reason private equity is so important in this is it's really hard to change a partnership unless you have the buy-in of all the partners, and they're not really invested in doing that. So what private equity affords is the ability to buy out all of these owners, right? And so they buy them out, they gain control, and then they turn it into a corporate model. They appoint a board. They'll bring in five external key hires, which are always the same five. It's a CEO, it's a CFO, it's a chief technology officer, it's a chief operating officer, and in most cases there will be new blood. Um, I say most cases, they'll try. I mean, it's
Yeah,
difficult when a professional services firm has a partnership because if you don't have the buy-in of the partners who are the commodity, you're going to fail quite quickly. So that's always an interesting discussion. How do we get the partners on board with a new leadership team, or is there a credible leader within the business? So that change happens quite quickly, and then yeah, they bring in a classic kind of corporate governance structure. They change the compensation model, so all of a sudden you're going from this fairly consistent, reasonably high kind of guaranteed pay to a much lower fixed salary, anywhere from kind of $200,000 to $400,000 is pretty typical, which can be about 50% what these individuals were earning
yeah,
previously. But then the upside, which is always related to um, originated revenue, managed revenue, billable hours, maybe some mechanism around kind of collaboration. Um, and then and then they run with it. So yeah, that is the flip, right? It is changing the governance structure and the operating model and the decision making model of the business to something much more efficient, where they can then drive the change that they see being wrong with the larger firms.
yeah. So really, the name of the game, therefore, right now is agility and ability to make business decisions quickly. And that's I think this another struggle that traditional partnership models have, is that you cannot have the cake and eat it too. You cannot have 1,000 people feel like owners, and these 1,000 people are expected to come together for a decision that needs to be done very, very quickly and decisively. So you either have a paralysis in the pursuit of collaboration and collaborative decision making, which means it is slow, not fast enough to react to the business conditions, or you actually make fast decisions, which lead to people feel like they're not heard and they don't feel like their own things, right? So how do you square that?
Yeah, I mean, and that's the challenge, right? I mean, the thing is, in theory and on paper, the larger firms should really be able to just squash these challenging businesses because they have the scale with the depth of
Yeah.
capability,
Yeah.
they have the ability to invest, they have the brand, they have really good alliance relationships with big tech.
Yeah.
But where they're struggling is yeah, one in the ability to make those quick decisions, move in a way, but also that they're losing the talent because they're not enfranchising their partners. They don't feel like true owners anymore. Um, and they're migrating. The top performers are leaving because they feel that they can earn more on a cash perspective. They feel that they're getting true equity that will be worth significantly more faster on a smaller platform. And they also have on a smaller platform, even if it is a corporate structure, they still feel that they have a better ability to influence generally. Um, because increasingly, despite the fact that these bigger firms are partnerships, that they're basically kind of this weird dynamic of having to evolve into a corporate model despite still being within a partnership. So, a lot of partners in large firms now, despite being partners, feel like middle managers. A lot of the decision making is not is been taken away from them. It's not what their predecessors would have been privy to, and so yeah. So I forgot what the question was, but that's yeah, a bit of an explanation on that point.
Very, very interesting, very interesting. If you were to sort of provide general perspectives on like what would you suggest the large, the large firms in traditional models ought to be doing in this circumstance?
It's interesting, when I started sort of bringing a lot of this stuff out on social media and stuff, there's a lot of kind of pushback, particularly by like retired partners of these firms. But now it's kind of come a long way, and then we're actually advising one or two of the larger firms exactly that question, which is if a private equity firm were to buy our business or this area of business, what would they do?
Yeah.
Um, and I mean that there's a lot of excess cost. There's a lot of dead weight, right? A lot of partners who aren't revenue generating, who are sucking out a lot of cost of those who are. Um, there is need for kind of, yeah, as I say, streamlined decision making, um, more openness to make decisions to drive faster. Things like M&A, which is a classic sort of PE
Yep.
move. They're buying these platforms and then rolling them up. It is about streamlining overall the operation in terms of the pyramid, right? So how do we now we have this technology available to us that can replicate at much lower cost the activity of junior staff in certain
Yep.
fields.
Yep.
How do we get that into the business quickly and sort of replace
Yeah.
the excess and unnecessary? So it's about cost reduction, it's about efficiency, it's about bringing in technology, it's about having partners who are genuine operators in the market,
Yep. Yep.
and it's big
Who actually own client relationships.
to
And
actually own client relationships.
And you mentioned something really important that that when you look under the hood, it's actually a small number of a disproportionately small number of partners holds disproportionately large number of client relationships, right? It's not actually evenly distributed, right?
Yeah, and I mean, just anecdotally, right? Like we speak to a lot of small business owners who had their nose bloodied a little bit. The amount of times we've come into a situation where a former large firm partner has joined a small one and overstated their ability, and they haven't lied, they just assumed it was them, only to find that they were unable to draw the client relationships they had at the former firm, because the client was always going to the firm. The
Mm.
client was tied in the machines, right? You look at the way the big four do financial due diligence, for example, with large cap PE. You can't pull those relationships out because the mechanisms are so built into the PE
Yes.
kind of IC funnel. And therefore, the ability to migrate these relationships isn't easy. And to your point, typically you will find that those who are genuinely able to do that and actually engage with the clients while still at the big firm are a minority. And so it's a really interesting challenge because I don't know, but my assumption was there'll be more partner headcount reduction in the larger firms. And the problem that a lot of those folks have got is they don't have the requisite, well, some of them do, but they've never been taught to sell in the way that they need to be successful on a smaller platform. Like the larger firms, such established institutions.
Yeah.
Someone said to me, it's like having a big catching mitt. Like it all kind of comes in. They're on the receiving side. Whereas if you go and work for a 500 person PE owned shop, no one really heard your name. You've got to be out on the front foot. You've got to know how to sell. You've got to know how to get it. It's a completely different way of working. So when you take one from a large environment and try and plug them into the other, and they haven't got those relationships, that they're very rarely successful.
Yeah.
And again, that they come with really high comp compared to how they're paid on these smaller models. So it's a really difficult challenge. It's one we help a lot of clients with, and like really, if they are going to go down the route of trying to hire an individual coming from a big brand name, like we really want to do thorough diligence on like
Yeah.
how realistic is it that they can migrate those relationships.
Yeah. This was very good. This what I really liked in your answer is the theme is the advice to the large firms is look at yourselves through the lens of a private equity interested in acquiring you.
Yeah,
What would they find and what would they do? And do that to yourself,
yeah,
right? Do that to
yeah,
you. That many of these large organizations actually do have internal capabilities to do it all, right?
yeah,
From
yeah, yeah.
honest
Ironically,
to honest valuation, right? They have every aspect of capability to actually conduct this self-surgery, right? If they choose to do that.
I
Um,
think, yeah, as I say, and as a result of that, I think a lot of the partners within these businesses have the awareness of this. Well, I know they do because they're telling us this, and it's just the ability. And going back to the original question, the governance does not enable easy transformation change. You saw it with EY, right, and the Project
that's right.
Everest, the details, the details.
The famous Everest project. So, can we summarize this quickly, if you don't mind, for the audience that might not be aware of what was the concept and how it unfolded?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be careful not to say too much, right,
Yeah, of
about
course, of course.
an individual firm, but I mean, the concept was a relatively well, understood one, which was to separate the consulting and advisory business from the traditional audit firm. Yeah, and that's the challenge, right? It's really hard to combine two very juxtaposing businesses, that is accounting and consulting, which is, I mean, everyone knows, right? Became particularly difficult post Enron scandal and
Correct. Yeah.
collapse of Arthur Andersen because of the regulatory nature. But there's lots of other facets of the accounting business that make it incompatible with consulting, and they both kind of hold each other back. Um, but yeah, without going into too much detail, like effectively, I think the want of the majority was not of partners was not achieved, and it's likely that that was a result of a quite outdated governance structure that
Yeah.
that particular firm had. And then that, to summarize, is consistently, I think the challenge that the big four at least face, because they're fantastic organizations, right? Like, I mean,
Absolutely.
you worked in Deloitte for a very long time. I mean, the ability that they have to upskill, produce best in class.
Yeah.
They are. I mean, rightly, I mean, to their complement and detriment, they're a breeding ground for incredible talent.
Yeah. And
And
if
they
you think
work.
about it, they have successfully managed to reinvent themselves over and over and over
Yeah,
through this history that is now, 180 years, right?
it's
So,
incredible.
right, they succeeded. They went through, world wars and depressions and recessions and so like I believe firmly that there is an absolute spot and space for organizations like those in this new environment. The question is just will they be quick enough to reinvent themselves to the point where they can be where they can continue to provide a value really in this new environment where all these other dynamics are playing out as well, right?
Yeah, and to my point earlier, right? Like if they didn't have these kind of challenges that we've spoken about a little bit, you know, the scale they have, you know, alone should enable them to dominate in these industries. It's just how able and willing are they to make the necessary changes to realize
Correct.
that
Correct.
potential
Correct.
in the new world. So to suggest that, and you hear it a lot. There's a lot of like big four bashing and some of it bit for myself, but the reality is, you know, with a few kind of tweaks to the way that these businesses are running, and to your point, right, this has lasted so long as market leaders, and there's very few businesses in history who can say that within their given sectors.
Absolutely.
Um, you know, the smart money would be on them some way finding a way
Yeah.
to continue to exist. And I think they will. And I think, you know, you do see it. And again, not going to name names, but you know, one of them right now is clearly quite gearing up again to trial that separation, a quite public rebrand and restructure that would really set it up quite nicely to separate those businesses. And I know internally that that's kind of the thinking and sense of what's going on within that organization. Um, so my guess was right. You know, we can sit here and keep pointing out what's wrong with them. I think everyone knows what the challenges are. It's the ability to make the changes that's going to matter. And as I say, I think it might take a little bit of time, but at some point, I can't see all four of them not
Yeah,
innovating
yeah,
and
yeah, of
moving
course,
forward.
of course, of course. So, James, you of course you are in the business of sourcing top talent, senior top talent, like senior equity partners for these world-class top firms. Um, can you maybe tell us what are these firms looking for when they search for this top talent that you are helping them find? Then maybe, and how has this changed over the last 7 or 8 years that you've been doing this?
Yeah, how do you put this? And it's maybe not necessarily a good thing, but it's become a lot more commercial, right? Like I think the large firms and the partnerships, and maybe this is how the disruption has occurred, but they maybe weren't like the most commercial animals. You know, that they were very good businesses. They were partnerships. They looked after their people. I think the emergence you're seeing now is that the firms that are doing well are really quite focused in purely on individuals who can generate revenue for the organization. So the importance on the kind of broader firm building metrics, for example, um, have gone by the wayside a little bit in favor of, I would say, more commercial um, metrics, as I said earlier, like revenue generation. So whenever we're doing a search with the client, um, I would say the only question, but the majority question is what revenue can they generate on our platform, and how can you be sure of that, James? Where's that revenue coming from? What's the non-compete? The non-compete has become incredibly important. You know,
Hmm.
if someone has a 2 year non-compete that is being you know firmly enforced in a certain state that you know allows that to happen, and that's a really big prohibitor. But to answer your question, it's all about revenue generation, particularly with these growing firms. If we hire a group of partners, how quickly can they become revenue generating? And that's also why, sorry, 1 second. That's why M&A is so interesting because you kind of mitigate that process if you're buying a business, right? There's obviously more risk in terms of integration, but the plus side, one of the plus sides to M&A is you've not got to wait 2 years for the partners that you're buying to serve a non-compete. So it kind of mitigates that risk a bit. But at least from the client side, the question fundamentally is always for a partner, how quickly can this person help build our business?
Hmm. That's a it's a clear answer to my question. So thank you for that. Um, how about if you look from the talent, the candidate side? How, what are you observing at the top talent that you work with? What are they looking for? in their next firm or the next company. If I use
Yeah,
firm to describe partnership and company to
yeah.
describe corporation, right?
They want it. They want two things really. They want to feel more independently more rewarded for the work that they're putting in. So earning potential based on performance is really a shift, right? And a lot of people now favor that. I think when we first started seeing some of these models of like low base salaries and high upside, a lot of people were quite nervous about that. But now I think that's more favored. I think it's a real frustration of a lot of partners, high performing partners, that they're underpaid because a lot of the revenue they're generating is going to weaker performers.
Mm-hmm.
I think this equity piece is really important, and we do a lot of advice for growing businesses around how they can enfranchise ownership within their employee base, particularly at the more senior end. So, how do we set up either true equity or phantom equity or B units, so that the individuals we're bringing in are truly have skin in the game,
Yeah.
and benefit from the value they create within the organization. And then a third point is really that sense of like autonomy and direction within the firm. We were laughing before we came on, weren't we, about like, it's a big frustration of a lot of partners in the Big Four that every expense they have is scrutinized by someone that they've never met overseas, or if they've got an IT challenge that they're having to wait time zones to get it sorted out. You go to a
Yeah.
smaller firm, Dave from upstairs comes and fixes your computer. So they've just lost a little bit of a sense of like actually running the business, and autonomy that a senior person, I think, appreciates. Decision-making process, strategic influence, access to the CEO. Um, it's all of those things. It's I guess you could capture it in like entrepreneurship, right? Like it's really in vogue right now to be working on more entrepreneurial platforms where you get out more what you put in, as opposed to a partnership, which is a little bit more consistent, low risk, but also doesn't necessarily over reward high performance.
Mm. Very, very, very good. Very good. Thank you for this. We got a number of questions coming from the audience. Dan is asking specifically. So there is a lot of uncertainty in the industry. You are in the
Yeah,
business of sourcing talent.
yeah.
Do you sense that we are in a sort of buyer's market or the seller's market as it relates to the top talent for professional services?
Oh, it's a big buyer's market. So and what's driving this is every PE fund now seems to want to have an asset in the sector, and the price of these accounting and consulting firms is just skyrocketing as well. You saw it in the UK. You had these three assets before Christmas in the accounting sector: Grant Thornton, Cooper Parry, Evelyn Partners. Um, all very good businesses, but pretty like standard accounting firms. GT something a bit more. Um, and we were working with one or two PE funds looking at these businesses and go into the detail, but the price that they ended up going for far exceeded, I think, what a lot of people had expected, and that was largely being driven by the sort of significant interest from a multitude of different PE funds who were looking to come into the space. And pretty much every fund I speak with now wants to have an asset in this sector. There's a lot of FOMO. And
Mhm.
so what this does is it means that once they've been bought at a very high price, there's a lot of pressure to grow. They're typically putting a lot of capital in, and therefore they have very aggressive hiring targets, many quite unrealistic, to be honest with you. And the knock-on effect is, going back to our point earlier, there only being a finite number of partners who are able to genuinely grow these businesses, and there being a lot more potential homes for them because there's a lot more firms who just weren't on the radar before, but because now they've got a good PE backer, are able to attract this type of talent. I think you're going to see the price for top performing partners really skyrocketing. If I flip that and look at the more junior levels, I think the opposite's going to happen. Um, I think
Seller's
I,
market.
it is. It's a seller's market, and why
Uh,
is that? Um, because of the things we're talking about. It's the trends of AI, which people talk about a lot, but I don't think is fully realized yet. I haven't really seen a serious firm who have really got a properly capable, agentic AI that's doing analysis and stuff. There's also the trend of offshoring, right? Like,
Yep.
um, I don't know, like I can't give a number to it, but a significant. If you look at the growth, for example, just of the big four, anecdotally, in the US and Europe, it's slightly on the decline, but globally, it's up like 6%, and that's all coming in offshoring locations. India, Indonesia, interestingly, Egypt's really grown quite significantly. What impacts is having for top talent? Well, it's devaluing, I think, the price point in the sort of local markets, and therefore, my prediction over the next 12 to 18 months is you're going to see a lot of talent coming to market from these larger firms because they're going to have to slim down. But at the senior end, the genuine client relationship holders, that's only going to increase and accelerate. And we're seeing that in the market, right? Some of the salaries that top partners are attracting to leave a larger firm to go to a smaller one is at levels I've never seen before. So yeah, a long answer to a
Oh,
quite
no,
simple question. But
actually,
hopefully
actually a fascinating answer and a clear one too. So the way I interpret this is for the most senior leaders who have demonstrated impact in their careers, this is the time. Like now they can actually realize their financial potential, but if you're not there, it's going to be a problem. And if you're junior, you're going to have a real problem, right?
yeah. I scare people, but yeah, I
I mean,
guess so.
it's a fact. That's the reality of the situation, right? Now, Jim is asking a question around how are private equity firms actually looking at valuating professional services firms, given that professional services firms are to a certain degree a cash business, right? There are not a lot of physical assets, and mostly value resides within humans that are in the firm, the partners and the partner relationships. Um, do you know, like, or can you share a little bit how do PE look at valuations of professional service firms in general?
Yeah, I'm not as close to it, but yeah, it's definitely around like ability, cash flow generation. It's definitely around diversification of services offering. It's around the strength of the client base. Like we do a lot of work with PEs around diligence work, and a lot of the questions that we ask are as much around like softer kind of sentiment analysis and like really trying to understand the sentiment within a business
Hmm.
as much as it is the kind of cash flow side. I think every PE, where they're quite nascent into the sector, has a different approach and a different way of looking at that. Um, yeah, as I say, I'm not as close to the kind of direct valuation of things, but those would be a couple of thoughts about how I think that they're looking at it based on some of the diligence that they're bringing to us.
Thank you for that. One more question that I think is quite actually relevant to the discussion, especially given how you answered, like what are the firms looking for in their top talent? You said commercial is number one. So question number one is what will this partner actually be able to convert and generate in terms of revenue, right? And business. And there's always been a struggle between, how do you reward those, especially like those hunters who are so skilled in and so self-contained in their success versus
Danibor, sorry, one moment. You've gone off my sound. Sorry, could you repeat the question?
yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry,
No,
call it. Yeah,
no
it
problem.
went somewhere else in the office. Yeah, go on, say it again. Sorry.
So the question is, have you seen incentive models emerge that are finding the balance between individuals' performance and also the need to be a team player and collaborator for the greater good of the firm, right? This balance between what I would call hunters and farmers, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's a brilliant question because it's right at the heart of a lot of what we do for our clients, right? Incentive design. And what we've found over a number of case studies that it's incentives that really drive the behaviors in a professional services organization. And I'd break it down, right? You have the individual performance is very cash orientated, right? So it's how do we reward this person in the short term, annually based on their ability to generate revenue. And it's usually quite a simple mechanism that converts that into cash. Some firms pay as much as it's usually tiered, but if the first 2 million you make, you'll bring 40% home. The next 2 million, you take 45. And then if you go above 6 million, you take 50%. So that's just really easy way to incentivize individuals. There's two other mechanisms. You then have kind of like, well, how do we, within that model, incentivize our MDs, as they are not partners, to collaborate and to sell each other services?
Yeah.
And you have some really interesting mechanisms around like, yeah, you can generate revenue by selling a colleague's services. You take a percentage of that, and the firms that are doing really well are really thinking quite closely around how that kind of unsiloed incentive can exist in the organization. The other crucial factor then um, around retention and sort of team performance comes down to the equity component. So how do we create an equity structure, be that through Phantom, be that through B units, or whatever the mechanism might be, that rewards one retention and kind of firm building type behaviors, and that's typically related to sort of firm growth. It can be softer targets, and then it's deferred over a number of years, typically with a vesting schedule. So yeah, there tends to be sort of three or four components to a modern professional services package, and yeah, related to revenue and firm growth predominantly. Although every business has its idiosyncrasies.
This is very interesting because you just sort of made my light bulb go off as you're
Right.
describing the different models that could be combined into the complete reward package. One model that is more sort of a short-term cash comp driven, and it's directly linked to your performance in year, let's say, and directly linked to your actual realized sales revenue, whatever. And then a complementary model that's in place that is sort of translating your teaming and firm brand building and kind of those kind of successes into a greater equity play for you. So almost like there is a long term and a short term initiative that combines into a comprehensive model that kind of balances it for you personally. This is how I translated what you said. I thought it was really good. So these are two different models potentially coming together for a package that would be the right one for the circumstance. Is
And
how
they
I
offset, yeah, no, exactly. Then they offset each other, right? Like
yeah, yeah.
you want that individual to be driven for short-term reward. I mean, which is
And then
which is
you
what.
have a lever to pull up or down, perhaps even at the individual level, to further incentivize this kind of behavior or that kind of behavior, but never over rotate on either, because both extremes would have negative consequence, right?
Yeah, and what you tend to see then to couple with that on the cash side is quite a lot of firms are now deferring comp because the challenge to our point earlier, a lot of these business the number one challenge PE has is partner retention, right? Because it's getting
Yeah.
so competitive. So then you tie in the other mechanism, which is deferred compensation, and deferred equity, schedule vesting, and the longer you then stay within the firm, the more you have kind of in the bank to realize at a later date. So yeah, some firms might pay you 50% of the revenue generated now and then 50 this time next year, but pay you 1.3x on that as a kind of thank you for that piece.
Yeah.
And then yeah, the equity is designed to incentivize you to grow the business, whether that's your practice, whether that's the business at whole. It really depends on the objective of the CEO and the investor. But fundamentally, that's how you kind of bring these different aspects to drive the core behaviors of individual performance, but not at the expense of firm performance. And as I say, that extra component of how you can be rewarded for selling your fellow MD's services to a mutual client.
Mm, mm. Excellent. Thank you for that. So I'm going to ask you the final question, which is going to be like if you can play the movie forward by a few years out with regards to professional services, what do you feel or think is still to come. Like, what are these trends leading us towards? And while you're thinking about that answer, I'll just make sure that I invite the audience to follow you, James, on LinkedIn. Your posts are spectacular, right on. Um, so for the audience members, please do follow James on LinkedIn. And if you enjoy this content, I would also invite you to like and subscribe on the YouTube channel TechTonic Conversations so that you get notified when I post my new content. So with that, James, maybe that's the final closing question. So where do you think this is taking us, or taking professional services business?
Yeah, I think, behind the scenes, under a lot of NDAs right now, but there's a lot of fragmentation. There's a lot of groups of senior partners looking to set up their own entities, looking to be far more operational, AI enabled in the way that they run their organizations, all with the big carrot of being able to attract a major PE investor or not, remain independent. But fundamentally, because the prize of going out not alone, but as a smaller entity is so great, you're going to see fragmentation. You're going to see increased tech enablement. We haven't spoken much about AI today because I think you touched upon it on a lot of your other podcasts, but that's going to be massive, right? The ability to run these businesses more efficiently as a result of AI in the place of what is the largest cost of a professional services business, which is the people, is about 60-70% of the cost.
Yeah.
Is to enable these partners to make a lot more money by being a lot more client engaged and operational at what they do. And they're going to need true experience, right? I think the winners in this market and of this kind of fragmentation are going to be partners who have genuinely been there and done it and are known for something, true expertise in a certain sector or a certain discipline. It's going to be really interesting to see how the larger firms respond, as we've spoken about. I don't think they're just going to sit still. I do think change is going to happen. I do think there's going to be some breaking up, some kind of streamlining of these businesses. The pyramid's going to get a lot narrower. So that for me is the big question: is how are these larger firms going to
Yeah.
restructure or reorganize in a meaningful way that we haven't really seen yet in response to this threat? So it's a fascinating time for the industry. It really is, and yeah, exciting to sort of to be a part of from the outside.
It certainly is. It certainly is. James, thank you so much for your time. This was really a masterclass on professional services, especially what's going on right now in the industry. Reflection on talent, reflection on what's to come. We'll post this very soon on our YouTube channel. And with that, I'd like to thank you again. Wish you a happy Thursday, and same to the audience. We'll see you soon. Bye bye.
Thank you, Danny Boy. Thank you.
All the best.